Дорогие друзья,
Friends,
сегодня у нас с вами, с моей точки зрения, сущностный
great pleasure to open a very substantive and exciting debate on challenges for business and management education 2021. We have two high-level policymakers and great thinkers, Sergei Stepashin and Alexander Zhukov. As a moderator, I would like to provide some background information. Business and management education is evolving, and the public seems to be increasingly aware that business education is in demand, is needed because it is an important profession. Very often, people believe that the economy or management is just an appendage to the politics, but actually it includes management psychology, management law, and management economy, with a focus on behavioral aspects. We need to train people who will be able to do that. We have about 120, 130 schools, business schools, or management faculties. Russian-based MBA programs are developing, and they're also put on the list of the top ones around the world. But we don't have it incorporated in our law or in the law on education. MBA is the higher master's degree, and it is considered as additional education, and there are issues when Russian diplomas are classified and recognized abroad. So these are issues, but there have also been a lot of achievements. During the pandemic, there was a serious threat to those achievements. They were challenged, and we know that many business schools around the world almost stopped their training or went completely online. So what is the situation in Russia? And I would like to ask this question to the deputy chairman of the Presidium of the National Accreditation Council for Business and Management Education. We have the CCI Russia, Association of Russian Banks, Business Russia, the Pillar of Russia, or Opora России, and the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. I'd like to ask the head of this organization, Mr. Zhukov, a key high-level statesman. So for almost a year, we've been living under the conditions of a pandemic. What is happening to Russia's business and management education? What are the key challenges? What are the key peculiarities that you can identify? Thank you, Mr. Masayadov. Indeed, our economy in general, just like other economies, has seen drastic changes and major difficulties, and that applies to education too. Since March, all the universities have been online. There was a period when we wanted to go back offline, but it didn't last long. Everyone returned online very often, including business schools and the entire system of business education. We had to employ new methods of operations. Overall, speaking of our business education, management education, it has been able to handle that test despite the challenges the entire system faced. And overall, I believe all the other universities seem to be able to rise to that challenge. But the crisis itself forced us to introduce many changes much faster than without it. Both universities and business schools had to acquire additional equipment very fast. Had it not been for the pandemic, they would only buy that equipment maybe in a decade, and everyone had to use broadband connection. They picked and employed new online platforms. They had to readjust their interface, their communications with the students. And in almost all universities, business schools, training was able to continue. This is the key takeaway. Most of corporate training programs went online. There's been some quality leap in that. It's been driven by a crisis, but that is now a reality. Specifically, I'd like to mention advanced retraining programs. These are MBA, DBA, high and medium-level managers. Actually, I got a similar degree, but 30 years ago. What's particular about these programs, it's not just about education. Education is extremely important, but networking is much more important. They're always in contact, they talk to each other, and it's really difficult to do that while you're online. Without it, management degrees definitely are not do not have the same worth. But what is a pleasant surprise to me is that even amid this difficult situation, our business schools have been able to come up with a hybrid format. They kept some networking pros and their networking advantages and combined them with online tools. I also studied some global experience. I believe that our schools and universities were on par with their foreign peers, and some of our schools even performed better than the world-acclaimed universities and business schools. Thank you so much, Mr. Zhukov. I fully subscribe to what you said. I talked to some of the deans of the leading business schools in Europe, and they say they are fully online. While here in Russia, we have a hybrid format, both online and offline. So you're the president of the Presidium of the National Accreditation Council for Business and Management Education. It's abbreviated as NASDOBR. It's a public education, public interest organization. You have volunteers who work there. So, in your hat as the president of that organization, how do you feel a year into pandemic? First off, I'd like to say that the previous meeting was held in normal times, under the ordinary circumstances. Indeed, our council unites banks, major corporates, and I believe that this organization was able to adjust to this new environment. And our goal over the past 2 years has been to finalize its documents to register a new industry-specific Council on Law and the Economy. Despite the challenges posed by the pandemic, we've been able to finalize that process. And again, it's a inter-industry council. So usually managers are trained for one specific sector, But by definition, a manager should not just focus on one industry. It's definitely a profession that could be applied to any industry. And it's great that we finally have this new council for law and economy, and it's an achievement. It's the pinnacle of the work that the NASDOBR, that our organization, was doing. So we've done a lot of online work. We've accredited some of the degrees in business administration. We've done that in close contact with government. I believe this is extremely important. By and large, I believe that our organization has been able to strike a fine balance to mix both online and offline, working with experts almost across the board. Do I get it right, Mr. Zhukov? Do you really believe that currently the centerpiece of the efforts of this organization is working to come up with professional standards, and the fact that you have now registered a new council on law and economy, this is really a leap forward. Yes, we believe this is a major step forward in enhancing our education. Actually, it incorporates the operations of about 40 similar centers and organizations.
Также в качестве рабочей организации будет NASDOBR.
And definitely we'll have a council on professional qualifications of managers. Well, they'll run in parallel. Maybe we'll merge them. But that council has its own history, and perhaps the new council will inherit something.
Мы вот на заседании сегодня буквально создали рабочие органы.
We set up the working bodies of that new council of professional qualifications, and definitely we have top-notch experts on board. They represent top corporates, banks, Association of Russian Banks, top lawyers, notary officials, notary public, and it includes key experts in law, and they will definitely have to come up with those standards, education standards, and these education standards will enable our teachers to train top specialists in law, and that is the key element that drives efficiency of both the government and the private sector. That's something that we really need. Well, as a follow-up question, today, deputy head of that council on qualifications, on your deputy, is Sergei Stepashin. Let us turn to Mr. Stepashin and ask a couple of questions to him. Mr. Stepashin, unfortunately, right now, is on a flight to Vladivostok, Russia's Far East. He's not able to be here with us, but he responded to some of the questions so that he could be part of this debate and this conversation about the future of Russia's business and management education. Let us give the floor to Mr. Stepashin right now. So we asked it's a pre-recorded interview. Now, as you know, the National Council of Professional Qualifications recently approved, or rather registered, dedicated council on education, and on economy and law.
Возникало довольно много сомнений.
Well, actually, there were a lot of doubts. Do we need to combine law and management?
Большие
These are two big areas,
будут
to be-
органично уживаться вместе.
so to speak, areas of research and science.
Человек, который
What
управляет
is your take on that?
непосредственно
Well, it's pretty
в органах власти,
obvious to me,
в разных должностях, в том числе
self-explanatory. I've worked
представитель
in government, I've worked as Prime Minister and as
Я
the
через пример
chairman of the Association of Russian Lawyers.
в современной России.
It's pretty clear to me. Let's take an example from Russia's
Принятие, в том числе
Russia in the 1990s. Definitely, political economic decisions were more important, privatization and so on.
это подгонялось право.
And then we adjusted our law to that, and we provided the right buffer, legal
Согласиться, наверное.
cushions, so that these people would not be jailed for what they did. That's just an example of what it was like in the 1990s.
Экономических
You first took an economic decision, and then you adjusted the law accordingly.
Закон — это противоречие в том числе
Anyway,
нашей Конституции.
that's a paradox. And again, that was a paradox that was enshrined in our, and
Последствия
that runs counter to our constitution, and that could also have a negative effect on motivation.
с вами задумали, то, что, безусловно, реализуется, мне представляется
So that could be a moral hazard too. So what we have now envisaged, I believe, is extremely important, efficient, and viable.
В ближайшее
My
время
second question,
СПК
as a follow-up.
управлению и праву предстоит
This
определить
Council
группу
on Economy and Law will have to
что-то создавая с нуля, что-то
list those standards which we will need to create from scratch, and which will, some of them will be needed to revised.
право начать.
Do you think there should be one standard or list of standards that we should start straight away? Well, first of all, we need to
прямо сейчас.
come up with the finite list of those standards.
Второе, я уже в
And again, we shouldn't do it in a hurry.
послушать специалистов.
And as I said, we need to talk to our experts.
Просто не услышан. Вы знаете, у нас
We need to make everyone get their voice out. You have the same faces in the media. We need,
возможность нам
on the contrary, to give the floor to a broad range of experts, those with practical experience, those who work out there in the field. Then we come up with a list of standards, and then we put them up for public debate. And again, not just within our council. We need to have a down-to-earth discussion.
сейчас в лед говорить о каком-то
I don't want to mention any specific standards on the fly. And
просто не стал.
no, I don't want to give any ad hoc assessments. It wouldn't be
Спасибо. Еще один вопрос в этой
proper
связи.
thing for me to do.
В ближайшее время СПК «NASDOBR» по управлению и праву предстоит
The council will have to
профессионально-общественной аккредитации.
look into professional accreditation
Это будет
in
во
a very
многом
close
новый
way.
феномен, новое поле
And that's uncharted borders for us. But I know that the Association of Russian Lawyers has been engaged in it for 10 years, for a decade now. So you know what professional accreditation is like. Can you give us your take? Do we really need this kind of activity?
С конца, безусловно, но
Well, start from the end. Definitely, we need that. As for our experience,
мы ее еще
again, it was our own initiative.
Кутафин,
Mr. Kutafin
Дмитрий Медведев был.
and Dmitry Medvedev, who was president back then in 2008, they had a meeting. And Mr. Medvedev is head of our steering board,
От нас вот
the board of trustees.
тоже у нас с юридическим образованием.
So we sat together and started looking at our law education.
В России было
Back then,
более 200
we
юридических,
had more than 200,
более 1200.
sorry, more than 1,200 universities and colleges where people could be trained as lawyers. While in the Soviet Union, we only had 55. So you have like a garage, you know, or a one-story building that says law faculty.
Указ в 2009 году.
This is why we issued a decree in 2009, and a dedicated commission was set up to look at the quality of education. So we cleared some of that space. I'm sure it could shrink even further. So right now, out of 1,200, we only have 500. Everyone liked that. And the Ministry of Education supported us. And then we took a second decision.
Давайте мы перейдем к оценке программ.
Okay, let's now appraise degrees. We have
В рамках
a dedicated council. And again, I'm in charge of it.
Работаем с Рособнадзором. 35 мы уже вузов юридических факультетов посмотрели по
We
программам.
looked at the degrees of 35 institutions. Some were dismissed,
Ведь активно привлекаем здесь.
and we rely on the expertise, on the public.
Люди готовятся. Это действительно серьезно.
People get prepared, they do thorough analysis, and we don't rely on administrative leverage.
Советы.
So I believe that our experience will be very much needed as part of this new Council on Law and Economy. Thank you. As an expert in management education, I often hear that institutions need new laws, new bylaws. They say we need new laws or even regulations, maybe, rules and regulations on business education.
Образование.
So we have a law on education.
Вот Александр Дмитриевич, он у нас
As
комментарий.
Alexander Dmitrievich mentioned, so he has vast experience in the parliament. As for me, I worked for the Supreme Council in the State Duma, and I was quite careful about laws. Yeah, so I am not talking about legal or business education. The less laws we have, the better for the country. So, well, when the speaker would say so, during the reporting period, we adopted 2,000 to 3,000 laws. But do you yourself know all the laws, if they are enforced, if people know about them? So it shouldn't be
Посмотрим, что и где не
like a must. So let's work within our council. Let's have a look at
есть
whether the law
полномочия управить.
is efficient. We can follow up with an amendment, so we can
Важно, чтобы закон
produce new laws. So it's essential not just to adopt laws, but to enforce them. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stepashin. One closing question. So you began by saying that the law and management go together well, and they are important at the level of the state and corporations. But what would you believe? As for the university curricula for law, do you need to have some elements related to management, and vice versa? In curricula on management, should there be some basics of law? So, well, you asked a wonderful question, and you managed to answer it. Of course, otherwise our lawyers work for the legal aesthetics, knowing lighting well, and our managers will make mistakes and will steal a little bit. So, somebody who worked for security services and the Ministry of the Interior, some people tend to be very passive. And the results of 2020, and Alexander Dmitrievich, who worked for the budgetary committee, he knows it very well, that 1.3 trillion rubles in the budget were not spent because people would send. I would not do anything. Otherwise, I could go to prison. So, well, let's
Это все законно.
have a close look on the procedures, and there is a bit of a confusion about the contraction system. And very often, our laws do not allow us to do anything. And I would like to give you two specific cases as the representative of the accounting chamber. So when we were building infrastructure for APEC and for Winter Olympics in Sochi. So what our president said, so we have the accounting chamber, we have the managers, and I would like to order you to work directly. If you have your contractors, yeah, so we actually moved to the manual control mode. So the project were successful, it was good, but in terms of life, management and construction practice, of course, it's not the way it should be. So we need some legal foundation for those who focus on practical works, including management, to help and protect people. And I think for your academy, RENAPR, it's very relevant
Вы знаете,
as a topic.
круг моих вопросов на сегодня иссяк.
I think
И
I'm done with my questions, and
согласие принять участие в нашей
our agenda is limited, so thank you so very much for your answers and for your agreement to take part in our shooting. So I hope we are successful. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks again, Mr. Stepashin. And now let's continue our talk with Alexander Zhukov. And from my side, I would like to mention that when Mr. Sergei Stepashin covered the challenging topic of the correct accounting statements when working on the national economy projects, I remember that the leading corporate institutions and business universities think about the special training program called RegTech, regulatory technologies, combining the opportunities of AI, which can generalize the existing statutory act and within the framework of problem can quickly context to implement projects without manual control. Let's hope that our physicians and mathematicians, together with our educationalists, manage to do it shortly. And let's get back to our discussion with Alexander Dmitrovich. I would like to ask Mr. Zhukov a question. So when you have trainings for analysts and managers, you would normally have a question. Please name us 3 strategic questions you will resolve. So as for NASDOBR, target number 1 was the Council, as mentioned by Mr. Stepashin. But if you would check the outcomes of the last year and your prospect for the future, of the multilateral activities by NASDOBR, what 2 are the priority areas you would identify? Well, first of all, I'm really happy that Mr. Stepashin agreed to join our council because he is not just an outstanding government official and head of the Lawyers Association, but also a person with huge management experience in very different areas. So he mentioned his activities in the Ministry of the Interior and the Accounting Chamber, and he used to be the chairman of the government, and we worked together in the State Duma. And when he was the chairman of the Accounting Chamber, and I believe that his contribution into the work of the Council will be really great. because it's essential to have that
управленческих
fine
решений,
combination
экономических,
of management
я бы так сказал.
solutions on the one hand and business and organizational solutions on the other hand. So he mentioned challenges in statements for the government purchases and tax affairs. So if you know the tax code, it begins with dozens of pages that list laws which made amendments to the tax code. So it was completely reworked. So maybe artificial intelligence helps us to
Вам, может быть, приходится с этим тоже сталкиваться и подготовить там документы.
guide ourselves through the tax code. So for the public purchases, it's really a challenge for a manager to meet all the requirements of law and bylaws. Yeah, and
Здесь квалификация
if you allow
важна, высокая.
violation, then you could be subject to criminal penalties. You need a vast practice. But answering your particular question
Какие наиболее
on what are the most important things, despite
связанные с
limitations which have to do with the pandemic, NASDOBR resumed its full-scale work of an independent experts community
по группе
in
специалистов.
its relations with the ministries and public agencies on the qualification of economics and management. So in December last year,
Полномасштабная
we
аттестация нашей
performed the full-scale
одновременно 43 эксперта
attestation of our National Financial University with 43 experts involved, and I think it was quite successful. We began preparation for the beginning of accreditation in 2021, so we shaped working groups of experts of 10 people for an independent audit of
должна быть продолжена.
General
Проводится
Education University, so the work should continue. We offer workshops for NASDOBR experts on retraining, so we update them on changes in regulations and statutory documents
еще один.
for the higher professional education. Mr. Zhukov, allow me to interrupt you. So we have the option of using the voting system. So let's ask those who listen to us to express their opinion on what they think about this extra accreditation system in addition to the obligatory public system. So while we're having this voting, we can continue. I'm sorry for interrupting you. So you started to work about the third most important priority area. Well, so this topic may appear new, but it's something like the public-private partnership. So at the government level, we pay more and more attention to shaping entrepreneurs' mindsets in the young people. And we are talking about university students and high school students as well. And I think it makes sense because to drive our economy, we need to develop entrepreneurship. And we pay a lot of attention to government programs, but without development private entrepreneurs, we are not getting anywhere.
NASDOBR вышел с
NASDOBR
инициативой, обратился
offered an initiative and contacted Mr. Sergei Kravtsov, the Minister of Education, offering to them support
цикл онлайн лекций и
with
мастер-классов
a 3 series of master classes and lectures on improving the financial and economic literacy for high school students for grades 9 to 11. I think at this age they are ready to perceive that type of information. And the lecturers for the master classes, as we propose, would be business people and experts in business education. So this initiative by NASDOBR was approved, and we concluded a contract on cooperation with the All-Russian Center for Development of Creativity and Humanity Technologies. And Sergei Pavlovich, as far as I know, you have already begun this work, and you started with a lecture for 400 high school teachers and professors, and they were interested in it, and I believe it's an exciting initiative for the school. Thank you, Mr. Zhukov. So, in this connection, I would like to ask our colleagues to take part in another votings and ask the question whether you believe the basics of entrepreneurship should be taught at school, or do you believe the school's curriculum is overloaded? And allow me to ask you another question. In the morning, Mikhail Andronov, president of Rusenergo, who graduated from either the FizTech or Bauman Technical University, so he said that today the education of physicists, mathematicians, technical professionals and managers, well, is separated. So at university, students are only focused on technical disciplines, and they are started to be trained as managers at senior age. So our professionals start to seek for grants from international universities. So if, according to Andronov, so if we would bring entrepreneurship training programs to the technical universities, so it would upgrade the quality and the level of our university. Well, I would agree with Mikhail Andronov. If we will look at our experience from 1990s, most of our bankers, of our successful bankers, so they graduated from physical and mathematical departments, different universities. And it may look strange because they didn't have any basic economic education, but there is something special about education in physics and mathematics. So this combination type of thinking. So if it would go together with a management education, it could result in some serious progress in scientific and technical areas in industry and even in banking and economic sectors. Thank you so very much. And maybe another question. I would like to begin with a statement. Last year, in 2020, despite the pandemic, we saw a number of breakthrough events in business and management education. A number of Russian business schools, well, at least 2 business schools, RANEPA and St. Petersburg Schools of International Management, were mentioned in the top business and management education rating by Financial Times. So they were listed as top 100, which was never the case before. And 2 more business schools, including Skolkovo, were eligible for international accreditation. So Russian business education becomes more and more mature, so it's more and more focused on qualities. Mr. Zhukov, what would you like to wish all the leaders and managers of business education schools, of those who try to work with the management science, what would you like to wish them for the Russian management education to become flagship both in Russia and worldwide?
Well, I'd like to wish them the same as to other Russians. We need to move back into offline. It's extremely important for business education. Networking is a critical element, and I really hope we could be able to go back to this. But as you said, our universities, leading universities and business schools have improved their position in the global ranking. I'm sure, I hope that this process would continue. Business education emerged in Russia on our term, and previously we didn't have any business education. So it emerged under our watch, and I hope that NASDOBR will ensure the proper quality through the council, through the accreditation work that is underway. I really hope that we will continue to focus on quality rather than quantity. If I may, I would like to announce the results of the poll. The first question was on whether we need to complement state accreditation with accreditation from academic institutions. 63% said yes, 27% said no, and 10% people said they don't know. And the second question is whether we should need to teach entrepreneurship in school. So no said 38% and yes said 62%. So it's really great to see that our audience, just like us, believes that entrepreneurial education, business education needs to be done, that it's a critical component of education at school level, university level. And I'd like to say a big thank you to those wonderful people who have participated in this debate on quality of Russia's business and management education. Thank you, Mr. Stepashin, and thank you so much to Alexander Shukov, who is here today in our studio, a leader of NASDOBR, an association that has been set up by the leading employers here in Russia, our well-known statesman,
Alexander Dmitrievich.
Alexander Zhukov. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking your time. Anything else? The last key takeaway, the last wish to the audience? Well, Happy New Year. What do you mean? 2021? Or, I mean, we have 2 New Years. That's what we celebrate here in Russia. Well, I'm referring to 2021, you know. We really hope that this one will be much better than the outgoing one. Okay, as a sum up, I talked to many friends, to Russia's academia. Despite everything, and despite the difficult preparations for this Gaida Forum, on January the 1st and the old New Year were celebrated with the same joy. And this even second holiday, I mean the old New Year, was even a happier one, was even more festive, as some friends told me. So I really hope that under your leadership, NASDOBR will really do a lot of good for our country. We really want to accelerate our growth and our progress. Thank you. colleagues,
дамы и господа,
ladies and gentlemen, friends, comrades,
спасибо вам большое.
thank you so much.
Поздравляю вас со вчерашним старым.
I congratulate you once again on the holiday, traditional Russian holiday we had yesterday, the old New Year that we celebrated on December the 13th. Sorry, January the 13th.